A few days ago, I found an ad online from someone selling a workbench that was over 100 years old. I didn't think twice and I went to pick it up. It's just the top part. Apparently, the legs got lost somewhere along the way and no one really knows what happened to them. But that's fine. I'll take care of that later. Let's see how I managed to handle this thing on my own. It's ridiculously heavy. It took 3 people just to get it into my car. I've been needing a new workbench for a while now, but lately I've had so much work, I literally haven't had time to deal with it. So I figured the only way to actually make it happen was to turn it into a video. But there was a problem. There are hundreds of workbench videos on YouTube, and I really didn't want to make just another one of those. You know, kind of boring, nothing special. So I thought, maybe restoring this old bench and turning it into something unique, with a few upgrades and some modern tools, might actually be something worth doing. First thing I need to do is take it completely apart, so I can restore each piece individually. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it's actually turning out to be even more of a pain than I expected. Some of the screws feel like they've been welded in place, and getting them loose is nearly impossible. Plus, there's years and years of grime packed into every corner of this thing. I'm seriously thinking I should put on a mask before I keep tearing it apart. I swear there were a couple of screws that almost made me give up. No matter how much penetrating oil I used, they just wouldn't budge. Gotta say, someone many years ago really knew what they were doing. I said this workbench is about 100 years old. But before anyone jumps into the comments to call me out, I have to admit there's no real way for me to confirm that. I'm just going off what the guy who sold it to me told me. And let's be honest, he could have totally made that up just to squeeze a few extra bucks out of me. So hey, if anyone out there knows how to tell the age of something like this, let me know. I don't know, maybe there's some tiny detail, like a certain type of screw that didn't exist before 1950, or some weird little clue like that. I don't know. There are a few things that make me think it might not be that old, but honestly, if you put it in perspective, 100 years isn't even that long. 100 years ago, they were already mass-producing cars. So mechanisms like this wouldn't have been unusual back then. And think about it. There are castles and cathedrals that were built over 1,000 years ago, and their wooden doors with iron hardware are still holding up. Original hinges, original locks, still working like nothing happened. That said, there's one thing that definitely feels over 100 years old. The amount of crap built up on this thing. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up digging out a dinosaur bone. I've got to be careful. Last thing I want is to stab myself with one of these nails or have a splinter from this wood go straight through my finger. I'd honestly rather get bitten by a rattlesnake. At least there's a cure for that. But who knows what kind of ancient bacteria might be hiding in here. I really don't want to start a new pandemic. I've got to admit, even though the surface is a total mess, the structure is actually in pretty good shape. There are just a couple of parts that need a little fixing, like this corner. There's also a crack here that will need to close up. A little trick to get the glue deep into a crack you can't open is to blow in some compressed air. That way it spreads across the whole inner surface of the wood. Like I said, the worst part is the surface. No idea what this bench has been used for all these years, but I can tell you one thing. It definitely hasn't been just woodworking. Some screws are completely hidden, and I've had to guess where they're even buried. Maybe it's just been sitting in a dark basement for the last 50 years, collecting layer after layer of dust and grime. Although, I doubt it. The thing has some seriously deep wear marks. Looks more like it's spent years in active duty. The three big planks that make up the top aren't actually glued together. They're just held in place with a few cross braces underneath. I'm not exactly sure why they did it that way. I mean, it's not like wood glue hadn't been invented yet. Maybe it's to help prevent warping with changes in humidity and temperature, so the surface can handle the small movements in the wood. I don't know, I'm just rambling. Someone out there probably has a much more logical explanation. Meanwhile, I keep running into difficult screws. This one had a stripped head, so I had to cut a new slot into it. It's taking me longer than expected to fully take this thing apart, and I still have to deal with the vices and get all their mechanisms cleaned up and working again. Well, I've got to admit, this is the part that worries me the most. I'm afraid there might be some piece in the vice mechanism that can't be taken apart without breaking it. And if that happens, there's no way I'd find a matching replacement. I'd have to swap out the whole thing, and I don't want to do that. It's not really about the money. I just want to keep these old cast iron parts. At first glance, some of these parts are in pretty rough shape, at least on the outside. They're really dirty and rusted. Not sure if I'll be able to restore them completely. The first thing I'm going to do is let them sit for a couple of hours with one of those super strong cleaners that's supposed to tackle any kind of grime. It seems to have worked pretty well, and the parts are in a lot better shape now, especially considering how they were before. Now, I've got to deal with the rust. For that, I bought a product that's supposed to remove the rust and protect the parts so it doesn't come back in the future. It worked its magic overnight, and they look great. A quick brush with the wire wheel and the parts will be perfect. I've got to admit, I didn't think they'd turn out this good. I'm no expert when it comes to working with metal, and this was my first time doing something like this, so I was a bit uneasy. But I enjoy stepping out of my comfort zone and learning new things. Honestly, we're pretty lucky nowadays. Within seconds, you can find endless information online, videos, tips, and tutorials for anything you can think of. Back in the day, learning something new was way harder. You needed to find someone who actually knew the craft and was willing to teach you or spend hours digging through books. Now, you just type how to clean old iron into Google and there it is. Though you do have to be careful with what you type. I also searched how to clean a shaft, and yeah, that didn't go as expected. Let's just say I had to clear my browser history after that. All right, back to business. I'm flattening the 3 large slabs that make up the top so I can glue them back together, this time with wood glue. The workbench I'm planning will actually have 2 parts, so to speak. One side will have this section with the vices and the dog holes, and the other side will be an extension where I'll mount my table saw. I need a bench that looks good, but more importantly, one that actually works for me. My workshop isn't exactly huge, so I've got to make the most of every bit of space. For those of you wondering, yes, my workshop is inside a shipping container. Well, actually 2 containers joined together. So that gives you a rough idea of the size. I know it's nothing fancy, but for now, it does the job. Not that long ago, I started this whole solo adventure. I used to work for companies that provided the tools, the workspace, all of that. But now I have to build things up little by little. There are just too many expenses at the beginning. If things keep going well, there'll be time to grow. In just under 2 years since I launched my YouTube channel, it's already gone way further than I ever expected. So all I can do is keep working just as hard, because honestly, I really love what I do. was about to flatten the surface with the router sled, but then I spotted a tiny metal nail sticking out. So I've got to pull it out if I don't want to ruin my router bit. But of course, it wasn't that simple. Turns out there were a bunch of hidden metal bits completely camouflaged in the wood. It took me a few hours to track them all down and get them out. Without this little metal detector, it would have been impossible. I ended up pulling out 27 pieces of metal, and at first glance, you could only see 2 or 3. I've decided the best approach is to start removing layers from the surface until I get down to wood that's still in good enough shape. First, I'm going to flatten the underside so I have a nice, solid base to work from. Finally, you can actually see the real color of the wood. I'm pretty sure it's beech. It's a pretty common hardwood, but also easy to recognize. It has these tiny little lines running along the grain that make it unmistakable. Plus, it's one of the go-to choices for workbenches. Tough, durable, and not too expensive. Before flattening the top, I'm going to run the sides of these 2 pieces through the jointer. They're way too thick to cut with the track saw, and this will make things much easier. I just need to glue them back onto the main piece, and then I can flatten everything at the same level. I'm having to take off quite a thick layer because the surface is in pretty bad shape, and in some spots the damage goes pretty deep. But I don't want to overdo it and end up with something too thin either. There are still some marks left, but that's fine. I'll figure out how to deal with them later. I just realized I forgot to cut this side, and doing it now is going to take me 3 times longer. I have so much work that sometimes I don't even know where my head is at. All of us at some point struggle with maximizing our potential or just keeping things under control. That's why I want you to check out today's sponsor, Strawberry.me, an online platform that connects you with professional, personal coaches to help you move forward. You take a short quiz and get matched with a coach who's right for your needs, whether it's managing your work or just finding clarity in a busy life. My coach didn't tell me what to do, but he did make me see that maybe having 7 projects going on at the same time isn't such a great idea. He asked the right questions and helped me set a real plan. All sessions are online, flexible, and super easy to book. These coaches are professionals trained to guide you not with answers, but with real tools to help you clarify your goals and stay on track. So if you're overwhelmed with tasks and decisions, maybe what you need isn't more coffee, but a solid conversation. Try it yourself at strawberry.me/marmotaworks and get started. You'll never regret investing in yourself. Thanks to strawberry.me for supporting the channel and for helping me avoid burning out before my sander does. All right, time to fix this little oversight. It's no big deal. Just a quick pass with the router and a bit of chisel work, and it's done. Next up, the vise. Before I start restoring the surface, I need to fix a couple of cracks. I think the best way to make sure everything ends up level with the rest of the top is to reattach them in place and then flatten everything together. To be honest, I'm a little worried. I'm cutting and flattening almost every part, and I'm not totally sure everything will line up properly in the end. There might be something I'm overlooking, but I guess I'll find out when it's time to put it all back together. Hopefully, if there's a mistake, it'll be one of the easy ones to fix. For now, at least this vise still fits, so that's something. Now that I see it like this, the whole bench all fixed up and that old beat-up vise piece still untouched, it actually looks pretty cool. There's something about the contrast that really works. I even considered leaving it just like that. But let's be honest, I'd probably get tired of it after a while. So yeah, I'm sticking to the plan and restoring every single piece. The sides of this piece do need to be flattened with the track saw if I want them to line up properly. But since the blade isn't nearly big enough to go all the way through, I have to finish the job with the router. This piece is giving me way too many problems, and I'm spending way too much time on it. I just noticed it's missing a chunk. I was this close to leaving it like that and coming up with some excuse, like I wanted to keep a little imperfection to honor the age of the bench or something equally poetic, but I couldn't do it. Not because I didn't want to lie to you, because I couldn't lie to myself. It was stressing me out just knowing it was there. I wouldn't have been able to live with it. Well, in the end, it wasn't that bad. One more hour of work and it's fixed. I was planning to keep the tool tray that ran along the bench, but I've changed my mind. Honestly, I don't find it all that useful, and it was going to make the workbench too wide. It wouldn't fit well in my workshop. So I've decided to get rid of it. Functionality comes first. At some point in its life, this workbench definitely had woodworm, but there's no sign of anything alive now. I've stripped down almost every single piece and haven't seen a thing, and there's no sound either. The easiest way to check for active woodworm is to press your ear against the wood and listen closely. Still, I'm not taking any chances. I'm treating it with woodworm killer just in case. One of the pieces used to turn the vise was broken, so I'll have to put my modest metalworking skills to the test and try to fix it. Question for the experts out there. When I touch the central rod with the grinder, I get sparks. But when I try the outer piece, nothing. It's like it's made of plastic. Anyone know why that happens? Is it because it's some kind of cast metal that, for reasons beyond my knowledge, just doesn't spark with an angle grinder? It's something that really got me curious, so if anyone out there can shed some light on it in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. I know some metalworkers out there might see this as a bit of a hack job, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now I need to deal with the color so it matches the rest of the pieces. I don't want to use paint, so I did some research and found an old technique that was traditionally used to darken and protect metal. It's called bluing, and it involves heating the piece with a torch and then dipping it in oil. That creates a surface layer that protects it from rust and also gives it this aged, darkened look. The guy who sold me the workbench also had a bunch of old beams sitting in his storage. So after a bit of haggling, I bought a few to build the new base. They're not the same type of wood, but I figured it was still a good idea. After a couple of hours flattening and squaring up all this wood, I'm starting to regret my great idea. I always find a way to make things harder than they need to be. Would have been so much easier to just buy the lumber from the store, already clean, straight, and ready to cut. But hey, too late to back out now. Building a base for the workbench like this isn't particularly exciting, and I don't want the video to drag on too much. So I'm going to go through this part fairly quickly, not trying to bore you to death. To make the joints, I'm going to use a dado set, but first I'll remove as much material as I can with the bandsaw to make things easier afterward. These types of dado sets are considered somewhat dangerous tools. In fact, they're not even legal in some parts of Europe because they don't meet current safety regulations. So if you decide to use one there, it's at your own risk. If something goes wrong, your insurance company is going to wish you the best from a distance. So let's use it carefully. In woodworking, you should never be afraid of your tools. Fear makes you hesitate, and that's when things get dangerous. Just respect them and use them the right way. If you're using a tool for the first time, any tool, the most important thing is to learn how to use it safely first. Luckily, we live in the age of the internet, where you can even find videos on how to hammer a nail. I did a bit of research, and apparently these things are considered dangerous mainly because you have to use them without the riving knife behind the blade, the part that helps prevent kickback. Also, they're said to make it easier for the arbor nut to come loose, so you've got to tighten it properly and check it regularly. A lot of people ask me about the stuff I use in my videos or where to get it. And since in this project I'm using quite a few different tools and products, I'm going to leave a list in the video description. Most of the links are Amazon affiliate links. If you know how those work, you're probably thinking I put them there to make money, and the answer is yes and no. Let me explain. Every time someone clicks on one of those links and buys something on Amazon, they give me a tiny percentage of the sale. Sounds great, right? Well, not really. That percentage is very small. For example, if someone buys clamps through my link, I get less than $1. This can be a good source of income for people who make review videos because their audience is already looking to buy that product. So a good chunk of them might actually click the link. But if you're watching channels like mine, you're probably here just to watch some woodworking, not to go shopping. So very few people click those links, and the earnings are modest, to put it politely. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. Any bit of extra income helps. But let's be honest, the one really making money here is Mr. Jeff Bezos. I mostly do it to help anyone who's genuinely curious about a product I'm using. And if I make a couple of bucks along the way, great. But honestly, I'd probably make more if I spent those couple hours working in the shop instead of copy-pasting links. Anyway, back to woodworking after this totally unnecessary e-commerce TED Talk. Yeah, I know, some of you are probably cringing right now seeing me use screws instead of nice round wooden dowels and glue. I'm not exactly thrilled about it either, but there's a reason. Like I said before, functionality comes before aesthetics. In this case, I'm doing it this way because the base of this bench needs to be disassembled one day. There's a spot in my workshop it wouldn't fit through otherwise, and honestly, I'd rather not leave it behind when I move to a bigger shop. Hopefully that won't take too long. And hey, maybe this is a good time to remind you that if you want to help me keep growing and get there someday, you can subscribe to the channel. I know, some of you watch almost every video but haven't hit the button yet, just out of pure laziness. It's fine, I get it. I do the same thing with other channels. As long as you keep watching, I'm happy. I need this workbench to be mobile, but I also want the legs to be individually height adjustable, mainly because sometimes I need to level the surface, especially when I'm working with epoxy resin. That's why I'm installing these caster wheels that can be adjusted for height. I'm also adding a couple of fixed legs in the center, since the bench is pretty heavy and could start to sag over time. Alright, time to set the bench on the base. If I've done everything right, it should fit perfectly. Let's find out. For anyone working alone in their workshop, I really recommend getting a small ceiling hoist. They're not even that expensive, and it's made my life so much easier. Well, looks like I didn't mess it up. Everything fits perfectly on the first try. That doesn't happen very often, but it's one of the best feelings in woodworking. You make a bunch of joints, and then everything comes together like a puzzle. I need to do something about the surface. It's full of woodworm holes, nail marks, and bits of embedded metal. I'm going to fill all those holes with black epoxy putty. I like the idea that when something can't be hidden and still look good, you just don't hide it. By filling everything in black, the imperfections will stand out clearly, and I think it'll actually look better that way. Much better than trying to hide them with some wood-colored filler that never really works. Plus, it'll give the bench a bit of a unique character. For the other part of the top, I'm going to use a thick sheet of beech plywood. Even though it's technically the same type of wood, there's no way to get it to match the color of 100-year-old timber perfectly. But there's not much I can do about that. There are some techniques and products out there to artificially age wood, but I doubt I'd get a better result. I'd probably just end up with yet another color that still wouldn't match this old beech. And yes, I said beech, with no T in the middle. So let's keep it classy in the comments. I'm going to dress up the edges with these oak boards. At least on the top part, the part people actually see, I need to cover up the joints and the screws. I had these boards lying around from a previous project, and they're perfect for this, since I need something hard and resistant to knocks and scratches. This time, the color of the wood doesn't really matter because I'm planning to paint it black. I think it's going to look good. It'll give the bench a more modern feel and match the black putty I used to fill the holes. The first thing I'm going to do is position the pieces and fix them in place with dowels. It's the best way to make sure the miter joints line up perfectly before I glue them. Once they're in place, I sand them flush with the rest of the top. I need to do that before painting, because once they're painted, sanding is no longer an option. I almost forgot to drill the holes for the vise before gluing the piece in place. That would have been a proper disaster. I don't even want to think about how I would have fixed that. But hey, got lucky this time and caught it just in time. The last thing I need to take care of is the holes for the bench dogs. They're in pretty rough shape, so I need to clean them up and make sure they all have the same shape, so the dogs fit properly in every one of them. I made this template using the laser cutter to make sure all the holes are exactly the same. I also need to keep in mind that the radius I'm giving them now has to match the one I'll use later when I make the bench dogs. I'm also going to make the bench dogs out of beechwood so they fit as well as possible. I actually like this wood. Its color and grain might be a bit plain, sure, but it's easy to work with. It's a bit softer than oak, but it's also one of the most affordable hardwoods out there. When it comes to wood pricing, what really matters isn't how pretty or ugly it is. It mostly depends on how abundant it is in the area and how long the tree takes to grow. And in that sense, beech is pretty fast for a hardwood. For example, oak takes around 100 to 120 years to grow into something you can use for quality furniture. Beech, on the other hand, is ready to harvest in just 50 to 80 years, which is considered fast, apparently. Among hardwoods, poplar holds the record for speed. It can be ready to harvest in just 10 to 15 years. But there's a catch. Even though poplar is classified as a hardwood, it's actually quite soft. That's because the classification of hardwoods and softwoods is kind of misleading. It doesn't actually refer to how hard the wood is. It's based on whether the tree is deciduous or evergreen. So you end up with softwoods like yew that are much harder than some so-called hardwoods. Yeah, I know, it's confusing. Every now and then I like throwing in stuff like this. Personally, I find it interesting. And since this channel is all about woodworking, maybe out of the thousands of people watching, there's one or two who enjoy these little facts as much as I do. Well, for those of you still here with me, we're almost done. I had completely forgotten I still need to make the bars to turn the vises. The easiest way to make a part like this would be with a lathe, no question. But I don't have one. Maybe someday I'll get one, but that would mean actually learning how to use it properly. And that takes time. Something I don't exactly have a lot of right now. So for now, I'll have to keep coming up with workarounds like this one. If I want this to hold up over time, I need to give it a durable finish. I'm not a big fan of polyurethane varnishes. They usually give the wood a shiny, plastic-like look that I don't really like. I'm using a water-based varnish instead. I've used it a few times before, and I like the look it gives the wood. And with a couple of coats, it's durable enough for a workbench. All that's left now is to mount the vises. Everything's going together smoothly so far. It's all fitting on the first try. I'm really glad I took on this project. It's going to feel great having a piece like this in the workshop. Restoring something this old has been fun. I'd never done anything like it before, and I actually really enjoyed it. Maybe I'll tackle something like this again sometime in the future. For now, I'll just keep collecting ideas. Well, I guess that's it. As always, thanks a lot for sticking around until the end, and I hope you enjoyed watching. See you next time.